Never underestimate the power of a fan edit. Hello everyone, my name is Yara, and today I'm going to be reviewing the Scorched Throne duology by Sara Hashem, which consists of the Jasad Heir, which came out in 2023, and the Jasad Crown, which comes out this coming July 2025. Thank you to NetGalley and Orbit Books for kindly giving me an e-arc of the Jasad Crown in exchange for an honest review. This is an Egyptian-inspired adult fantasy duology following a girl named Sylvia, the last heir to the now fallen kingdom of Jasad. 10 years prior to the start of the novel, Jasad was brutally burned down at an event that is now referred to as the Blood Summit. Jasadi citizens were killed or forced to go into hiding, and its magic is now criminalized throughout the 4 remaining kingdoms. The entire royal family, including Sylvia, is now presumed dead, and Sylvia wants to keep it that way. For the last 5 years, she's assumed a new identity in a small village as a chemist's apprentice, and she is now solely focused on her own survival and wants to leave Jasad behind. That is, until in a moment of anger and fear, she lets a bit of her magic slip out, and it is revealed to none other than Arin, the Prince of Nizal, Nizal being the very kingdom that laid waste to her homeland. To keep her identity safe, she ends up making a deal with Arin. She will help him lure out the Jasadi rebels in hiding, and in exchange, he will ensure her freedom. So this is a book that largely came under my radar through TikTok, as does a lot of things nowadays. Never underestimate the power of a fan edit. I have become obsessed with so many things because of fan edits and fan art. Truly the backbone of our society. But anyway, it definitely worked for me for this series to grab my attention, and so I want to talk about it today. I'm going to start this review talking about my main pros of the series, what I really enjoyed, and what I think might interest you in checking this series out, and then I'll go into more of the cons I had with it, my critiques, as well as my overall thoughts about the duology in general. So a lot of the marketing around this series has centered on the romance aspect, this enemies to lovers romance aspect, and so I guess I'll start there. The first thing I say though is that I do want to warn people who are going into this expecting it to be or to have the level of romance of a typical romantasy. You may be disappointed. The relationship between Arin and Sylvia is really important and really developed, but romance itself is not actually a big part of the series until way later. So just heed your expectations if you go in expecting that, but otherwise, I actually really liked the romance, and that is coming from someone who I consider myself an enemies to lovers skeptic. I know that is kind of blasphemy to say on the internet, but I feel like so many times enemies to lovers is more interesting as a concept than it is in execution, or else I feel like it's not executed to its full potential. A lot of times I feel like it's just a way to use the kind of passion and energy of hatred to fuel lust between characters, which can be fun sometimes, but often those authors tend to neglect the more emotional and romantic development between the two characters, which is what I really want to see. And so I ended up being very pleasantly surprised with how it was developed in this series. It is very slow. Honestly, the series in general is just a slow burn. It's not the most fast-paced book you're going to read. It really takes its time to acclimate you to the characters, to the setting, to Sylvia and her story. And I know that might be a turnoff for some people, but for me, it really worked because when we did get those more emotional moments, romantic or otherwise, it just felt like there was more of a payoff. It felt more earned and it felt more cathartic as a reader. There are some moments that are not even necessarily romantic between Arin and Sylvia, but that I found so incredibly sweet and so tender. And oh my god, the yearning, especially in the second book, the yearning was to die for. Love a man who yearns. I'll talk about more things about the romance later on, but I do want to take this moment to highlight what I think is one of the strongest aspects of this duology, and that is the individual character arcs of Sylvia and Arin. For Sylvia, we start the series with her very hell-bent on self-preservation, a quality that is largely shaped by abuse she has faced in the past in the name of preparing her to be the heir of Jasad. Abuse that has forced her to learn how to be brutal, to see other people as threats, and to not let other people in. But what I think this book explores really well is her moral dilemma in believing that she has a right to her own life, that she does not necessarily owe her life to a role, to a duty that she was just born into, and that she is allowed to choose a different path, while also balancing that with her genuine care and concern for the Jasadi people and her desire to see them freed from their persecution. It brings up questions of what cost she is willing to incur in the name of pursuing her own freedom, and also how does she secure her own freedom without hurting people that she loves. To add to all of this, Sylvia is also learning more about Jasad from this more outside perspective, learning that what she believed Jasad to be, her understanding and experiences, perhaps might not have been the entire truth of what was going on, especially with its leadership. She has to deconstruct and reconcile a lot of the memories she had with new knowledge and evidence of corruption that may have been occurring. Sylvia's story honestly gave me a lot of Anastasia vibes, specifically the Broadway musical, if you've seen that, which I really enjoyed, and that was a really interesting take to have on this kind of story. For Arin, his arc really gets to shine in the second book because he becomes a main POV in addition to Sylvia. As Prince of Nizal, Arin has obviously witnessed, if not been complicit or actively participated in some of the horrible atrocities that Nizal commits throughout the lands. When we meet Arin in the beginning of the story, he is the commander of Nizal's army, and he is explicitly trying to not be like his father. He is trying to change the system from within. He is trying to create more paths for fair trials and ensure justice, as well as trying to help poorer districts so that they are not forcibly targeted into conscription into the army. Yet, even though he doesn't want to be like his father, at the start of the story, Arin still is motivated by this desire to rid the land of magic. He still believes that magic is inherently harmful and evil and should be eradicated, even if his methods are a bit more humane. Given that setup, I was really curious in how the author was going to handle Arin's development. It was kind of a make or break sort of thing, especially going into the second book, but I actually ended up really enjoying the way that Sara Hashem wrote his character. Arin is this very orderly, meticulous, politically savvy, and strategic character, and so it was really interesting to see all the ways that he is physically, emotionally, psychologically unraveled as he is forced to confront the different lies that he has been told all his life, and in turn try to make amends for the harm that he has caused. He's very Zuko-coded in that way, I'll say. He actually ended up becoming my favorite perspective in the Jasad Crown. I always just found that I was excited and looking forward to his chapters. Side note, there is a section of the Jasad Crown that I think is like the best in the entire duology, and they are from Arin's perspective. Obviously without spoiling it, but it is the sequence where he is doing his 3 tasks. If you know, you know. I think a core theme of this duology and a central part to both Arin and Sylvia's character arcs is this question of what truths do we build our realities from, and what do we do when those truths change? I think this quote from Sylvia really highlights that. You think your mind is a blank slate, where you can build your own networks of information from scratch through pure logic and reason. You ignore that each child enters a completely unique world founded on different truths. We build our reality on the foundation our world sets for us. It highlights this idea that even though we view truth as this objective reality, there actually are a lot of external factors that influence and bias the ways that we consider truth, and also influences how truth is presented and experienced by different people given different circumstances. And I think the author did a really good job at unraveling all those truths and lies throughout the story. For instance, the Blood Summit, that event that started the burning of Jasad, is an event that haunts the entire narrative of the story. And yet, no matter how much we learn about it, no matter how much we think we know about what happened on that one day, we get more and more information that reframes our entire understanding of it. What players were involved, the timelines, different motivations, and seeing all that info come together in the end was really satisfying. I think that is what really got me hooked to the story, in addition to all that character work with Sylvia and Arin, as well as seeing how all those past events influence the current political situation between the 4 kingdoms. So I think that covers the main pros of the Scorched Throne duology, things that I really enjoyed, that I really took away from this series. I'm a very thematic, character-driven reader and can kind of see that in how I review these books. I think if you're looking for a story that focuses a lot on internal emotional journeys, unraveling complex political histories, and of course a slow burn enemies to lovers romance, I think it's worth checking out. To be fully transparent though, I do have to make mention of a lot of the critiques I had with this series, nearly all of them being on the level of craft. These flaws didn't always impact my enjoyment. I still overall enjoyed the series. I was heavily invested in the story throughout. I even requested the e-arc immediately after I read the first book because I just wanted to know what happens next. But there were definitely noticeable flaws that I think kind of held the story back from being rated higher for me. The first thing I'll say is that I think the writing was a little inconsistent. There are definitely some beautiful passages, beautiful lines in this series, moments that really affected me, especially the romantic ones. Again, I love yearning, and I love the way that yearning was articulated in this series. There were definitely moments where you can feel that these are meant to be show-stopping moments, and when they worked, they worked. However, there were some times where it felt like there was trying to be a quote-unquote moment where there didn't really need to be. It didn't serve the character, the narrative, anything. And those are moments where I was like, okay, can we kind of hurry along here? And so I wish there was just a little bit more discernment in where to place those lines and have those moments. In general, honestly, I think the series could have benefited from a little bit more discernment and editing. There were a lot of times where I felt like we were being spoon-fed information, not in an info dumpy way. I actually think the series did a good job of avoiding that. It was more so in a repetitive sort of way, like having certain observations that were always said when we met a certain character or interacted with a certain place. A lot of times things that I didn't think were really necessary and it didn't feel like the author was trusting you. There are definitely times where you need to have reminders of world building to make sure that your audience knows what's going on, but I wish there were more unique instances, different ways to articulate those ideas, or at least do so in a more economical way so I'm not feeling like I have to skim through passages of information that I already know. Even on like a sentence level, there were just some phrases and observations that I honestly was just tired of hearing, especially by the second book. Like, I'm sorry, I don't need to hear about Arin's eyes or his shoulders or his muscular back every single time that we see him. Like, I get it. He's hot. Banter as well, and this is not even a unique critique of this series. I've noticed it in a lot of romantasy and romance, or any story that has a romantic subplot in general. Readers and authors love banter, and I do too, I swear. I love good banter, but also there needs to be, again, discernment in time and place. I don't need banter all the time, and also not just banter for banter's sake, because again, it kind of stalls the narrative and feels repetitive. Since I'm already kind of touching on the romance, I'll just continue with my critiques of that. But again, let me preface that I really did love the romance, especially their individual scenes. It's more so of when I think of how those scenes were placed in the narrative is where I see more flaws. There was honestly, I think, a little bit too much focus on the romantic moments in the second book, or at least they were not placed in a way that was strategically sound. There would be sections of the book where I felt like we were stalling the entire narrative to have these romantic moments, and sometimes they'd be placed in scenarios where it felt tonally consistent given everything else that was going on plot-wise. And perhaps this may not have bothered me as much, but I did think that the ending was a little bit rushed. I still really enjoyed what happened, but I felt like I needed more time to really let everything sink in. And I wish some of that time that was allocated to the romance was allocated to that. My next kind of main critique of this duology, which may be a deal breaker for a lot of you as this is a fantasy series, but it was that I did not really enjoy the portrayal of magic in the series. Both in the world building sense, but also in like the literal way of how magic was described. Let me just say that I am not someone who is a stickler for a hard magic system. I don't need to know every little detail about the system. I don't even need it to make the most logical sense, honestly, as long as I can vibe with it. But even with soft magic systems, there still needs to be a strength in the prose, in the language, in the overall storytelling to be able to convey and illustrate the magic in this world. And I feel like we just got neither in this series, which is very interesting because magic plays a very big role in the narrative. It is the reason why Jasad was burned down in the first place. It is the reason why the current Jasadis in hiding are being persecuted. And it is also the spark that draws Arin's attention and brings Arin and Sylvia together and also poses this divide between them. And yet, the narrative doesn't do a good job of actually describing magic. It's hard to articulate exactly what was missing other than just that it felt missing. Magic is this some vague, amorphous idea that kind of just happens. A lot of the times, Sylvia would just say, I felt my magic build up, or my magic did this, or I called on my magic, essentially telling instead of showing what the magic feels like. Is it visceral? Is it cerebral? I don't really care, as long as you pick a direction and you can convey that to me as a reader. If there is any time to have flowery or fluffy language, it would be when describing magic. And so I was just really surprised that that was really missing from the story. I was a little bit more understanding when it came to the world building of the magic system itself, because in the beginning of the story, Sylvia does not understand how magic works. She was very young when Jasad burned down, and we also learn early on that she has these magical cuffs that were placed on her as a child that don't allow her to fully access her magic. But just going off of my experience as a reader, it was still very frustrating to literally not know anything about the magic system for the entirety of the first book. That's a bit of an exaggeration. We know a little bit, we get some details, but not nearly to the extent of really understanding what was going on. And I think what also bothered me is that it's not even really posed as like this mystery or this goal that Sylvia has to understand the magic. And so it was just this very strange juxtaposition of magic being very important in the story, but only as a concept and not actually utilizing it in the pursuit of it as a narrative device. I will give credit where credit is due. This is definitely much improved in the sequel. The second book does a much better job of exploring what exactly magic can do, how people use it, and there was a sort of training aspect for Sylvia to try to get more of a handle on her magic. But again, I still think the actual prose was limiting how much I could get immersed and invested in that part of the story. Honestly, by the end of the story, I almost wish that magic played a smaller role in the story, because otherwise, I liked every other piece of world building that we got. We got a lot of history of the actual founding of these 5 different kingdoms. Even some of the magical creatures and settings that we meet are really cool. But yeah, it was just a wasted opportunity, in my opinion. Speaking of missed opportunities, I also think that was a little bit of the case when it came to handling the side characters. I haven't really mentioned the side characters in this review so far, but Sylvia does have 2 best friends that we meet in the beginning of the story, Merrick and Sefa, who do end up playing a bigger role in the series. I love them when we're first introduced to them. I also love their relationship to Sylvia. Their friendship trio was so sweet. They also just love Sylvia unconditionally, which is something that she's not really experienced before, but something that she really needs. And it was really nice seeing how, even though she wanted to close herself off to anyone, they kind of squeeze their way into her heart. But after that kind of first third in the book, I think they are massively underutilized. They're kind of just used as collateral and as objects to push whatever narrative needs to happen for Sylvia. Again, credit where credit is due. This does improve in the second book. We do actually get POV chapters from them, so we get to see them have their own story arcs, see their motivations and what they need to work through. But again, I just felt like there could have been more from them, and I wanted more out of them. Similarly, there are some side characters that are introduced in the Jasad Crown that I thought were really interesting, and I thought that we were building up to have them not even play a bigger role in the story, but just have more deeper meaning within the overall narrative that I think ended up just kind of falling off and not really being utilized. And I think that kind of ties into what I mentioned earlier about the ending feeling a little rushed. I just wanted a little bit more resolution for a lot of these characters that we spent so much time with. So I think that is all I have to say about the Scorched Throne duology. To kind of summarize my points here, TLDR, I think it had really strong main protagonists, Sylvia and Arin, and their character arcs, a really strong thematic core and how that was developed, as well as a really addicting and entertaining enemies to lovers romance. But I do think the series was held back due to inconsistent writing, flaws in structure, as well as the poor construction of magic in this world. Given all that, and to kind of wrap it up in a little bow, I gave the Jasad Heir 3 stars and the Jasad Crown 3.5 stars. That might seem a little low given that I started this review very positively and recommending this series. My star rating system is very much a combination of my personal enjoyment and entertainment in the series and what I perceive of its actual quality and how effective it told that story, and that's why it ended up being somewhere in the middle. If you have read these books, please let me know your thoughts, and if you haven't, let me know if you're interested in checking them out. If you like this review and you want to check out more, please don't forget to subscribe, and otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye.